Hey there, welcome to the Reinsurance Podcast, the place where we dive into all things reinsurance, the coolest part of insurance. We're your hosts, Jared and Ben, a couple of ex-practitioners who loved the industry so much we founded Supercede to tackle some of its biggest headaches. And we're here to share our insights and stories with expert guests as we uncover what's really going on in the industry.
Welcome back, everybody, to another special double Bill episode, I was going to say, except neither of our guests are called Bill, and in fact they are familiar faces because it's Jared and Tom joining me, who's just ordinarily here. Welcome back. How are you both?
We're good. I'm good anyway.
I'm good. Yeah, a bit bemused by Ben's introduction.
Yeah.
That's what people come for, and then they stay for your actually valuable content. So we're all even. I have tried to make
banter, stay for the content.
And I've tried to make the video version of this podcast as interesting as possible today as well by maximizing my merch. But it is relevant to today's conversation because Supercede, which those of you watching can see is on my very trendy 3/4 zip jumper. Thanks, Jared. Were recently participants for the second time in their lives in the Lloyd's Lab, for which I have a beautiful blue water bottle on display. Thank you, Lloyd's Lab, for that. And the reason why that's important to today's episode is because it gave us the first real chance to start talking about a problem and investigating a problem that has been haunting the reinsurance world for decades. Anybody want to start off by sharing a bit about what that problem is?
Paranormal activity.
I mean, we should probably do an episode on that as well. If it is a very old industry, so it wouldn't surprise me.
Kind of is. It's an analogy that works, though.
Let's dig in. We love it. This is an episode's an analogy.
I think it is. There's, reinsurance buying is something that I think we've brought into the light, that we've brought to life through the conversations that we have at the moment, and there's very visible individuals that do all the work on that. Big personalities, great relationships. The reason we fell in love with the industry. But of course, they sit there and they have these meetings and they talk about the performance of their portfolios and the performance of the different reinsurance contracts that they buy and how that's going and what that's done to the relationship over the years and how that's running. But there's all these other people, ghostly ghouls in the background, typing away in unlit offices, neglected, cobwebs on the screen. The cleaners don't even go down there anymore. Flickering lights. And they're the people that actually run all these calculations and crunch all this data and pass information from cedent to broker, and then the broker will do all the work again, and then by these ghoulish characters down in the basement, neglected. No one cares about them, and they have to put all this data together to kind of tell how things are running, and that data is used everywhere. It's used. You can't do business planning without looking at your capital model and deciding how your reinsurance purchasing strategy impacts your exposures through that capital modeling. There's so many different places and uses for all of this reinsurance performance data, all of this contract data that we create, and we've sadly made the same mistake. We've neglected it over the years. We will not do that anymore.
No, we will not. I love the creativity playing from that accidental analogy. Cordy, whatever you gave us in those tablets at the beginning of the episode, it's brilliant. I'm kidding. We should take drugs more often before we record. Jokes aside, I think it's a really good way of framing it, though, because the way that these teams work together at the moment is kind of how you described it. You have these placement teams who go and get all the glory, and for whom the year of reinsurance is, if you're working on a 1/1 cycle, for example, is kind of all focused around September to December. How do I get the best possible deal? And December is the finish line. It's like, deal done. I've achieved what I set out to achieve. But actually, the contract incepts on 1st of January, and that's when the reinsurance year really begins for the rest of the business. And the rest of the business includes the people who have to take what is embedded in this incredibly inflexible and difficult to interpret Word document known as the contract, which is used to try and extract, posthumously almost, the key details of this deal by people who rarely see the light of day, sadly, because they're stuck trying to interpret them
I
all.
think the other thing that you've happened, and we've talked about the challenges of bringing this industry like digitally, but what you have is you have like deal makers on both sides of in the show.
Yeah.
But there's a broker talking to an underwriter, and the underwriter is saying, I like this, but I really don't like how much exposure we have to this one peril. And the broker going, no worries, we're going to cap that one peril to this. So then and the underwriter being like, excellent. With that's case, we can do this price. But then they hand that to the people who are sort of stuck in the basement going, don't worry, there's these 3 sublimits in these different areas to help make sure the reinsurer was happy. And that person going, well, how am I supposed to make this thing map the premiums I have? And now we get claims coming through, but I got to keep track of those 4 different sublimits that you've put on that thing to keep that one market happy. And I've got this thing there, and you've reinstated this with this one rule, and now you've got this other contract that's going to inure to this that sits there. I appreciate the client loves how this will work, but we have to make it work. You've made it work on a napkin.
Yeah.
I've got to make it work in the bank accounts. And this, but it's so thankless because they sort of are the ones that are handed this complexity, which is in many ways the right thing for the industry to do, to genuinely lean in and solve problems that are aligning what the reinsurer will accept with what solves the client's challenges. But we need as an industry to then translate that to how should we pay money to different parties and how should we collect claims from different parties. And that part has always been very, very difficult as a result. And systems are just very clunky.
And I
Well,
think
that's if there's only one party involved.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But of course there are 3, and so
many of each.
That despairing ghoul who's very angry at these sublimits that have been put in. There's an equivalent despairing character at the broker and an equivalent despairing character, and the thing is, all 3 of them will come up with slightly different ways of shoehorning the data into whatever system that they've got, which ultimately means everybody's going to expect different things from each other. All of the numbers aren't quite going to match up. They're not going to be able to reconcile the payments that have been made, and everyone just sits there more confused than they were, and it actually begins to erode relationships at that point, which is what the industry is based on.
I think there's this real awareness, and everyone sort of listening to the show will know this, but the discrepancy between what is the number we're talking about? No one's numbers make sense. But you hit on the exact right point. If most systems don't allow it to work, to enter in really, really smoothly, it means that everyone has fudged it to fit their version of a system. But 4 different fudged versions of data will never come out with the same output because everyone had to fudge it in slightly different ways based on how their own system managed it. And so that's the core is I had to set my EPI or my layer limit to the EPI because it's a quota share, and someone else goes, well, I handle quota shares this way, or I had to have 10 million reinstatements because I don't have an unlimited option in my system. And they just, everyone has their own version by which they sort of ham-fist it into the thing, and then we come out trying to be how much money do we owe you, and do we agree? And everyone's no.
Yeah, I think it's not just the complexity as well, right? So there's also a lag, which creates massive problems in the sense that, to your point, Tom, earlier around the many, many different other places reinsurance data needs to get to, it's no good when it gets there that late. One of the things we did during the Lloyd's lab, just to prove how big a problem this was to work on the problem of Lloyd's SRS returns, which, in and of itself, it's not that groundbreaking an activity. It's tell Lloyd's how much reinsurance you bought and where, because Lloyd's needs to know, because Lloyd's is acting as the regulator for you, or the sub-regulator effectively. So it's a pretty straightforward ask, but the deadline for doing that comes really, really fast after 1/1. And the problem with that is that actually the slips haven't come back in from the broker at that point in time. You're still waiting until a few days later, and then you've got to try and get the data out of the slips and into a system in order to be able to do the calculations, in order to work out where everything lies, and then to complete the form and so on. So we actually found, as a way of proving that there could be a better way, that we could take placement information captured during the deal and use that to fully populate a Lloyd's SRS return and share that with Lloyd's very, very straightforwardly. And I think that could be the same in so many different places right there. Again, it may be worth talking about this in a bit, how we do it with post-placement accounting tools as well to try and get data into those sooner. But at the moment, the market sort of has a tag team approach, right?
Yeah.
Where the placement teams are like working really, really, really hard until, December 31st. And then they go, we're done, right? Tag you in. And then suddenly the post-placement folks or technicians who work on the other side of the fence or in the basement, or the ghosts, depending on what analogy we want to use, they suddenly have to spring into action, having not really been able to do anything for the whole of that renewal period, because they're just waiting for the final slip to come through. And suddenly they have all the work in the world, and it's all super urgent right at the start of the year. So
it makes me think of, and to shift analogies, but it makes me think, when you go to restaurants, especially older ones in the city or something, where they just handwrite on the little sort of beige paper and pencil the orders, and they sort of stick that through. Like the speed by which they're able to go, well, how much of everything did we sell? And like someone has to read the really messy handwriting of one person and type it into a system. And other restaurants go, well, we just put it into the tablet. And when the order's purchased, like the system will say that was another item of X that we sold. The end. Like reinsurance is one of those ones that feels so obvious. Like, well, how much reinsurance did you buy? Well, I should just have the pile of receipts here that says it was all of these ones. But the fact that it is literally months later by which we sort of finally got done rekeying it in so we could say, here's what we bought, like that feels comically slow compared to how, at least the perception of it should be. You should be able to say, well, I bought that, and then the day I bought it, go, so there you go. This is what it was. Yeah. But it's not how it really works for most companies at the moment.
No, absolutely. And to your point around the sort of age-old processes for handling things, those age-old processes are in place not just for the taking of the orders, but even behind the scenes, right? It is literally somebody counting bits of paper and putting coins in a jar. We were looking at one the other day. So there's for those of you who are more on the placing side and don't see much more of the post-placement side, tons of cedents right now and brokers too are looking at their post-placement solutions and going, oh dear, this is no longer fit for purpose, because in many cases they were set up by like a couple of people who understood how it sort of needed to work and built something in their basement, and ran one or two person companies for many years that provided a whole company with their accounting software. There's something that could fudge it, at least to your point. And they're now all retiring, so they don't want to maintain it anymore, so they're sort of giving notice to some extent to their clients. They're not making any further changes. A bunch of them have sold those businesses as well to other larger firms who then aren't giving the support to that firm to continue making improvements. And so if you talk to seeded re people across the market at the moment, post-placement accounting is a nightmare for them. Some of them are putting in place new systems, or trying to, but even that's very, very difficult.
Well, and the requirements are changing, right?
Yeah, also true, right?
So Lloyd's actually changed the format of the SRS return. They simplified it because that was everybody's feedback, was that it needed to be simplified. So they kind of acted on that feedback and did it earlier this year. Unfortunately, what that did was it broke all of the automations in all of the post-placement accounting systems that people were using that generate, because it was built to generate the old return.
And the people who built those no longer work there.
And it's on a list somewhere to kind of update it and get it up. There's also Blueprint 2 and the change in the replatforming of the laws system and a lot of the integrations with that will therefore break over time. And as these things change, it just becomes very, very difficult to maintain.
Yeah. Well, and it begins to introduce this sort of like multi-party, like why does the industry adopt change so slowly? Because sometimes they want to make an improvement, but like 15 companies go, but that would make our thing break, so please don't do it. And they go, okay, we won't make that. We won't push for innovation or change here. Like we should do. But Tom, you rightfully point out that sometimes it's this additional burden borne by like loads of parties that they'll push against that change coming through, even if it's a simpler version, because it's like, well, whilst it's technically simpler to do, I still have to do like several months of work to rework all of my processes to generate your simpler version. So like, and you get this resistance to change and those are justifiable things, but because these processes are so manual and even the interventions about them are so manual, that these become really, really cumbersome, where systems built in like modern tech stacks. Like, well, it's fine. I'll just add or remove fields from this auto-generated thing in happy days.
I think that there's signs of encouragement there. Right? I know that by choosing a ghostly analogy, it had the sense that this was going to be a gloomy episode, but actually, there's light at the end of the tunnel, and those souls will eventually
like
find
friendly
peace. Right?
Ghosts. It's like a Casper vibe.
Yeah, or like the BBC series Ghosts. Have you seen that one? Which is also quite good. Or like Wednesday, if you're watching that on Netflix at the moment. You can be happy and dark, like Reinsurance. But anyway, the positive signs I think that we're seeing are, on one hand, APIs are changing things, which is great. Right? A lot of systems don't really support them, which is a challenge. And people are having to build all sorts of clever wrappers and things to be able to make that work.
Well, because everyone who built those systems thought my system will be the only solution that's used and it will solve for everything.
Exactly.
I think people are finally realising that that's not realistic.
So,
People will need lots of systems to do lots of very specific things, and those systems need to talk to each other.
Exactly. So we're seeing APIs actually be able to solve some of these problems, which is very exciting. So to give you a simple example, we've got clients implementing Supercede deals, integrating with Sonata, that kind of thing. If you've got a post-placement solution that needs to get data about what happened during the placements, you can pull it in from API rather than wait for a slip and then key it all in manually. And we're seeing that sort of thing happen more and more and more. But also from a people point of view, the ghosts are being allowed to come out and play and befriend the other teams, or they're becoming blended more and more. We're seeing quite a few seeded re-teams go, why is it like the way it is? It doesn't really make sense. Why aren't our placing teams working really closely with the post-placement teams and being able to provide that context and work together, not just in a sort of one after the other way, but actually simultaneously and working together to help each other? And I think you get to the point where you can start to imagine, if you have the right systems in place and those people are using the same systems and those systems talk to each other, suddenly you could have a really powerful and very well-informed seeded capability, right? If you're going through the actual process of renewals and you've got a whole team of technicians there to support you, you're going to be much better than the team that works completely siloed, one from the other. I think going into Monte Carlo, spoiler for one of my articles, if you see it coming out, I may not have written in advance because they asked for them quite a long time in advance, is like we have an opportunity, I think, as an industry to be much more like Formula One teams in the way we work, right? At the moment we have drivers who have the car and they go around and they do their race, cross the finish line, and then they sort of like chuck the car over to the technicians and go, off you go guys, go sort out the car for next time. And as we've learned from Formula One, that's not actually the best way to run these things. Actually we have pit stops, right? And it's become a model for collaboration and speed and efficiency. You know, you're on the phone constantly to the pit, analyzing the health of the car, understanding, you know, what all of your teammates and your opponents on the track are doing, and making sure you're adjusting to the best possible degree to get that extra second or two that will make you all the difference. And I think if Reinsurance had that same kind of mindset, like placement teams not just heroing it solo, but actually in constant dialogue with all of the data, all of the technical knowledge that's in those systems, they would be much more capable and would achieve much better results.
I love your enthusiasm, and I don't want to dampen what should be.
Are you going to correct my F1?
I'm not going to correct the F1.
Tom's a really big F1 fan.
I think what I will correct though is I don't see, I don't think we see these organisational changes and pre-placement and post-placement teams working closer together actually as being driven by ambition about a better world and a better way of doing things. Actually, the main driver for this stuff at the moment is audit risk. Because those teams aren't aligned, something has happened in the accounting and the management and the reporting of a reinsurance contract, which actually has to be reported in quarterly results and statements, you know, and missing a reinstatement, for example, can produce a misstatement of financial accounts that can send your share price crashing, like very, very high stakes, risky stuff. As internal audit teams start to look at how those contracts are operating, they are now forced to ask the question of, well, the way it's been set up, is that how it was intended when you went out and bought this, Mr. Placement Officer? And because those two teams haven't been talking to each other, that is identified as an internal audit risk.
Yep.
And actually, there's a lot more scrutiny over this stuff now than there previously has been.
Yeah, makes sense.
That's driving the change. Yes, there's a huge opportunity to be better and reap the rewards of that, but I'm not seeing that as actually being the driver behind the changes.
I need to send edits to my article now before it gets published. So it's also so that your car doesn't crash and catch fire and you get sued for killing your racing
flies
driver.
over the barrier and hits the fans.
Actually, if you plot pit stop times to deaths in Formula One, highly correlated.
Faster
As in-
equal fewer deaths?
Yeah, apparently. No causation.
No
there.
causation
It's-
whatsoever.
Covariance.
Yeah. Would you put in that same thread, because one of the other major drivers is when cedents especially are looking at post-placement systems, is to make sure that they're receiving as much claims back from the reinsurers as they're due. Like this kind of claims leakage issue. Would you put that in a similar category of if you have this amount of claims leakage, that directly goes to your combined ratio because you're not able to bring those payments back down, and we saw this with some of the results coming out now, that actually a slightly higher than expected combined ratio can absolutely slap your share price around because the market's saying, well, we thought you were going to be here 2 or 3 points. Maybe if there's leakage that's driving that up, is that kind of in that same category? Would you categorize that as a slightly different or adjacent?
That's the reason to buy a system to track the accounting, right? And actually that justifies getting the budget to acquire a system to do it. We know that claims leakage will exist for all insurance companies. Yeah. We know that it's around about 3%. We know that possibly half of that is due to missed reinsurance recoveries. I think, but for so long, that's been seen as exclusively the job of this post-placement accounting team. I don't even think if you got a consultant in to analyse your reinsurance recoveries, leakage due to reinsurance recoveries, if they analysed everything, all they're looking at is that post-placement bit. So all they're going to tie up is, according to how this contract was put into this system, have we missed any claims in the claims system or the policy admin system that actually we should have recovered on? And that'll be the number that they come up with.
So
what we're still missing is the interpretation gap here.
Yeah.
So how much claims leakage exists between what the placement team thought they were buying and what's actually been put into the post-placement system? No one's accounting for that number.
Yeah. The interesting thing and the thing that maybe excites me, because I'll sit between the two of you on this, is I think maybe it's this sort of pit stop time to death's analogy, but you have it where...
And then the ghosts.
Yeah, exactly. and then you've got F1 ghosts. But you have it where you make the decisions for this like audit, financial, share price reason. But the benefit that you just inherit from that is actually the car goes faster too. Like you get you don't optimize just for the speed improvement, which would be nice. You optimize for something else, but you by default collect that. And I think that's the really interesting thing that we're on the cusp of now as an industry going. We can make this other sort of audit piece go away. Oh, by the way, that is also going to help you with the improved results piece and the improved collaboration piece. All of that will come too. You just inherit that benefit. Yeah. And I think that combination will be like, I can sell the audit thing to the board because that's the thing that they'll care about, but I also will be able to sort of report to the board improved results.
Yeah, I think
those things become really a
everybody
powerful
has
combination.
an ambition to be more efficient, right? For sure. I don't think I've walked into an insurance company or reinsurance broker recently that doesn't have an ambition to be more efficient and decrease their expense ratio and really drive things forward with that. I've not walked into a single one that has to be more efficient right now. Yeah. The most urgent thing on our agenda is to be more efficient, said nobody. Ever. There's always something else that is the reason why that efficiency piece has become important right now. And that might be audit risk. That might be the impact of claims leakage. That might actually be the misalignment between us and our counterparties in these reinsurance deals is harming our relationships and making it more difficult for us to acquire the protection that we need. There are lots of those reasons. Yeah. Efficiency is great, but it's never the reason for somebody to act right now.
Yeah, could be a Formula One race intelligence and this sort of thing instead. Could be we don't actually know which positions our drivers finished in the Dubai stage or in Silverstone, and therefore we don't know how many places we need to gain at the next race. I don't know how transparent my lack of F1 knowledge is. I'm trying really hard.
You are trying really hard.
Did I name racetracks correctly at least?
Yeah. Yeah, they were mostly
reasonable.
Mostly correct. Yeah. So
I haven't watched Drive to Survive like everybody else apparently, which hasn't helped. But
you play a lot of Mario Kart, which shows there's no shells though. In
when they have to throw shells at each other and drive through magic cubes,
Max Verstappen still throws a banana at the other guys. You're like, he does, yes. Yeah.
So we've got a rare opportunity for the listeners to give a Drive to Survive reference. We could either turn out to be rock stars or fucking wankers at this point, because we'd actually like people to tell us that we're wrong about this. We're doing a research piece at the moment,
yes,
and we'd love to hear feedback from absolutely everybody on this. We'd like to hear their experiences on how placement and post-placement teams interact with each other. We'd like to be told we're wrong. There's a link in the show notes for this episode to a survey. We'd like it to be as wide-reaching as possible. If you work somewhere in the industry, we'd love to hear from you, even if it's anecdotal information that you've heard from.
Or even if you'd like to provide your answers in the form of an analogy.
That's it.
I mean, it's also like the other thing that makes this industry so interesting is the amount of like nuance due to like specific edge cases. Like, tell us those. Like, most of the time, yes, but on this one, no, because of all this. Like, those are things that are interesting too, right? The sort of specific edge cases that don't quite fit the mold for whatever reason. Like, tell us your weirdest thing and use that to tell us why we're wrong on this.
And you know, we're happy to share the results. The results will be public. If anyone wants to submit kind of long form information to us, that's great as well. And you know, we'll even give you advance sight of the stuff that we're printing up. We'd love to hear from people who might want to be interviewed on the subject, and really test us out, because we think there's a gap here, and we think that there's something we can do about it. Ben stood up at the Lloyd's lab and told everyone that he thinks there's a gap here and we think we can do something about it, and we got an amazing response to that. So we'd just like to widen that out to everybody else.
No, we're pretty excited, I'd say, at this point. Like, I think the early part of Supercede's journey was all about how do we get good data going into the system with like the submission information, and then how do we capture good deal information so that people can actually intelligently manage reinsurance deals. But then it's only kind of recently we've almost by pull from the post-placement ghouls. We love you really, post-placement teams, but who've said to us, can we have some of that data? Can we have some of the stuff that you captured during the placement? That's led us to do this survey and be like, well, maybe we can help. Maybe we can get really good reinsurance data flowing around your business much sooner, and make a lot of those processes much easier. So looking forward to responses.
Should be very good.
Is that the end? Any final thoughts?
We went through several analogies, which I'm very proud of.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
No one mentioned mustard.
No one mentioned mustard. No, and we have to stay tuned for the next episode for that.
Yeah, that's a famous analogy for those of you who hadn't heard it before.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to listen back through the entire back catalogue of more than 150 episodes to find that mustard reference.
But now we know Ben's Halloween costume already, so get your racing onesie on.
And we will see you then.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Reinsurance Podcast. If you enjoyed our show, don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a review to let us know how we're doing, preferably 5 stars. For more insights and updates, follow us on LinkedIn and visit our website at supercede.com/podcasts. You'll find the links in the show notes.